Florida governor and Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is well behind Donald Trump in the polls now, something like 30 points down. And it's becoming clear that if he's going to have any path at winning this nomination, he's going to have to market himself as the better candidate when it comes to particular segments of the Republican base, better than Donald Trump can. So DeSantis has already shown that he's not good at going after Trump directly. He put off attacking Trump for the longest time. He's only recently started to do it, and he is not very good at it. He makes these half-hearted and backhanded attacks against Donald Trump, and he often gets nervous while he does so, and you just can't land the blows effectively. Well, DeSantis is probably not going to win that game, and he probably realizes this. He just can't get down into the mud with Donald Trump and come out looking better than Trump does, because Trump has been doing this his whole life, and that's been his strategy. That's what won him over in the Republican base. But DeSantis might have the smallest of chances if he's able to market himself to, let's say, the religious right, because Trump, we suspect, is not a religious person himself. Remember that he quoted 2 Corinthians, and he said that he couldn't name any specific Bible passages when asked what his favorites were because the question was too personal. On top of not knowing anything about the religious texts, he also has lived a life that many would consider to be sinful within the Christian community, from his paying off porn stars to his valuing of greed and vanity and ego above everything else in life, to his countless lies. There's a lot of reasons to list why Trump is not a holy person, and certainly doesn't seem to observe religion. And this lack of religiosity was actually a major liability for Trump back in the 2016 campaign, and evangelicals were holding out their support of Trump in favor of candidates like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They only came around to him by and large at the very end. DeSantis, on the other hand, actually seems to know his stuff when it comes to Christianity. He can cite Christian stories and passages. He's Roman Catholic, which may not be the most suitable for some Protestants and specifically evangelicals in the country, but he at least can come across as a holier man than Donald Trump is if this is the approach that he wants to take and if this is what he thinks will give him the best shot at winning the election. Well, DeSantis sat down for an interview on the Christian Broadcasting Network, and he posed the question, what if I could have been there with Jesus's disciples? How cool would that have been? Listen to Ron DeSantis thinking about this possibility. If only he could have been at the table with Jesus at the Last Supper and then carried his message forward to try to convince people of Christianity. Let's take a look at the clip.
Could I have been there with Jesus's disciples? I mean, these are people who, Peter's just fishing one day, and all of a sudden, this guy comes up to him, catches all the fish, and says, you're going to be fisher. I want you to be a fisher of men. Come with me. And so these guys all went out, and they dedicated their life to spreading the gospel. And they all were killed for, they tried to kill John. John ended up, being able to survive. But I mean, the intent was to put him to death too. And, to talk about what that was like. Talk about what their impressions are. What did that? I look back at that and would love to have been able to be there with them.
So to his credit, Ron DeSantis actually sounds somewhat knowledgeable about this. He sounds like he knows the scripture. He's chatting up a storm about Peter fishing and how many of the disciples were killed, but John was able to survive. Of course, the analysis comes with delusions of grandeur, right? Because he thinks that he would fit in with Peter and Matthew and John. I guess it would be Peter and Matthew and John and Ron if he had it his way. And he's acting like he'd be brave enough to be one of those disciples and put his life at risk in order to carry out Jesus' message. But it's a hypothetical, and he's talking about how great it would be to live in antiquity and risk being put to death in some horrible way. But the broader point is that maybe this can help him ultimately win some votes with the religious folks who think that, oh yeah, Ron DeSantis could have been a disciple of Jesus. He's just that holy of a guy. But now I want to get to Mehdi Hasan, who responded to DeSantis in hilarious fashion after he saw this clip. Check this out, because Mehdi really hits the nail on the head and articulates why this is just absolutely hilarious, much, much better than I can. Let's take a look at Mehdi's take.
Now, Eamon, put aside the sheer arrogance of a Republican politician in 2023 suggesting he could be a disciple of the Lord, but just imagine for a second if alongside Peter, John, James and co, there had been a Ron who every time Jesus helped the poor and used loaves of bread and fish to feed the hungry, Ron was like, you're too woke, Jesus, you're too woke. Let them pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. Every time Jesus said, I don't know, we should embrace refugees and migrants, Ron was like, Stop all the wokeness, Jesus. Send them to Martha's Vineyard. The Holy Land is where woke goes to die. I mean, Eamon, the truth is that the Jesus of the Gospels and his disciples were way too left-wing for Ronald DeSantis.
So Mehdi pointing out there how Republican politics really don't align whatsoever with the teachings of Jesus, and also making fun of how Ron DeSantis manages to bring every single issue back to wokeism, no matter how far removed it may be. Mehdi's guest in this interview goes on to make another salient point, which is that if there's an analogy to be drawn here between the disciples and DeSantis, the analogy is to paint Donald Trump actually as the Jesus figure, believe it or not, and to portray DeSantis as Judas, the disciple who betrayed Jesus and turned him into the authorities in exchange for 30 pieces of silver. And that's because Trump did help DeSantis get elected. The degree to which Trump was useful is debated, but Trump did support DeSantis early on, and DeSantis had these fawning campaign ads showing how he was raising his children to be pro-MAGA. Now, because DeSantis is seeking higher office, he's turned against Donald Trump, and he wants to be the leader himself. So he's effectively turned Trump in for that 30 pieces of silver, just like Judas did to Jesus. Now, I don't actually think it's logical to compare Trump to Jesus even for a second, right? But I'm just saying if there's an analogy to be drawn here between DeSantis and the disciples, that's the one to make. So that's Ron DeSantis for you, mixing in some religion with his campaign. We'll see if it does him any good, or if evangelicals will continue to live with the cognitive dissonance that they've been living with for years and years, supporting Donald Trump despite the fact that he is a very sinful and ungodly person. Maybe Ron DeSantis has some shot if he decides to go this route. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of The David Pakman Show. It's been an honor filling in for David today. Luke Beasley, our correspondent and occasional guest host, is going to be filling in for the rest of the week, so we're looking forward to that. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the bonus show, assuming you are a member. If you're not a member yet, what are you doing? You got to make sure that you get yourself a membership. You do that by going to joinpakman.com, and once you sign up for a membership, you'll be able to see me on the other side on the bonus show. Looking forward to it. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
In the middle of the AI craze of today, it's easy to forget the beginning years of the IT industry. Let me take you back to 1989. Imagine living in a world without the internet and without mobile phones. Forget about smartphones. The IT business in India was in its infancy. One of the largest Indian IT companies, Infosys, was just starting offshore projects. Our sponsor, iThal, is promoting his new nonfiction book called Confessions of an Indian Immigrant, Dawn of IT Opportunities in the Land of Promise. It really takes us down memory lane, narrating his experiences immigrating from Mumbai to New York and the culture shock. A company headquartered in New York hired him, and it had given its first project to Infosys, which is now this multi-billion-dollar company with thousands of employees. And as the title suggests, the story combines his experiences settling down in the U.S. at the dawn of the IT industry, adjusting to social life in the U.S., including American business culture. And this book really has something for everyone, whether you're interested in tech, immigration, culture, or you just like a good autobiography. Pick up your copy at davidpakman.com/confessions. The link is in the description.